Greetings, friends. Welcome to One Word Advent Ministry. Thank you for stopping by. Thank you for clicking on this video. And I hope today together we can learn something as it regards the end time prophecies. Of course, if you're familiar with One Word Advent Ministry, this is where we break down one word of Bible prophecy at a time, and together with the help of the Bible and the spirit of prophecy, we endeavor to get a clear understanding of the Word of God, especially as it regards the end time message and the present truth. Pray with me, please. Dear Father, I'm so grateful for this truth and for we being able to study together. Bless our worship now. Teach us what we ought to learn. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so today we are going to speak on the topic of gold part 2. Gold part 2. But we're going to take it from the standpoint of the temples, the first and second temples. I may just say this, that I have done this particular prophecy under the word decrees, first, second, and third decrees. So it is basically similar, but we are going to deal with some of the punch points, the punch lines, as it relates to the gold, the candlestick of gold in Zechariah chapter 4. So, as we use a few charts here, I'm going to be using a couple of charts. The first one I want to turn to is the one that we have recently introduced. The one that we have recently introduced is this one. This is recently introduced. As you can see there, we have, let me pull back a little so we can see all of that. We have two temples. I'm going to turn off my air here a little. It's the summer, it's hot time, of course, and so I'm going to see if I can turn off the air a little so that be a little quieter. So we have the details of this, but as I said, we are going to give the punch lines in this. So what we have here are the two temples, Solomon's temple and the second temple that was built. Of course, we discussed that this first temple has a spiritual overtone and a connection to the apostolic church, and we saw that in Ephesians 2, Paul's account, and in Psalm 118, David's account. The Apostle Paul, speaking comparatively of Solomon's temple with the church, points to Christ as the chief cornerstone, in whom all the building fitly framed together, he says, is for an habitation of God through the Spirit, Ephesians 2:20-22. And David, he talks about it, then he said, the stone which the builders refused. This actually happened with the building of the temple, the first temple, Solomon's temple. And he said the stone which the builders refused is become the headstone of the corner. It actually happened, but it was pointing to Christ. And he said, this is the Lord's doing. Is it marvelous in our eyes? All right, so as we go through that, and 1 Kings 6 and verse 7, you will see the story of that. And so that's clear. All the videos I said, go to that and you will see. Now the second temple, it is key that we understand that Zechariah and Haggai prophesied about the second temple. All right, Haggai and Zechariah prophesied about the second temple. And we've found those in Zechariah 6, 12 to 15. We can read that. And we also saw that in Haggai 2, 3 and 9. So we're going to look at the temples, look at them, and the spiritual distinction between the two temples. The spiritual distinction between the two temples. So, the religious services in both temples were executed in the same manner, but the structural magnificence, both internal and external, Solomon's temple, comparatively speaking, was by far the greatest. But the Lord, by the mouth of Haggai the prophet, asked those who were then engaged in the construction of the house of God. Question: who is left among you that saw this house, the Solomon's temple, in her first glory? And how do we see it now? Is it not in your eyes, in comparison of it as nothing? The glory of this latter house shall be greater than of the former, saith the Lord of hosts. And in this place will I give peace, saith the Lord of hosts. I want you to underscore that term peace, because peace is something that we'll never achieve until this second house is built. All right, that's deep right there. Did we achieve peace in the literal second house or the literal second temple? And the answer is absolutely not. So the literal grandeur of the second temple in comparison with the first was as nothing. Follow me closely now. The second temple, although it was said is greater, but why? So the question is, why did the word of God say the glory of this latter house shall be greater than the former? Well, I want you to understand this. Literally, that was untrue. It was untrue if you look at the literal. So God wasn't really concerned about the literal features in this context. He wasn't concerned about the literal features in this context. Therefore, the glory of these two temples in comparison with each other is not in the literal visible form, but rather in their typical spiritual standing. Consequently, both temples cannot typify the same period of the Christian era, for one distinctly differs from the other. Since this is true, then the type shows that the Christian church in this instance is divided in two sections. So then, in type, the second temple denotes that the latter section of the church is to be far the greater, which in comparison the former stand as nothing. All right? So these two sections of church history, now put your minds now on the church in Jerusalem that Christ built. Right? The two also was pointed out by John on the Isles of Patmos. Hear what John said. So John was shown the true spiritual church of God in all ages. In a symbol of a woman, to her were given two wings of a great eagle that she should fly into the wilderness for 1260 days, which is years. And so the wilderness represents the dark ages between which time she was out of civilization. That is from 530 to 1798. And Adventists, as Seventh-day Adventists, we are familiar with this. So, as you're seeing there, between the two temples is an history that we ought to be aware of, and that is where we are focused. That's what we really are going to focus on, and then say something on the church, as you can see there, that is represented as the system of the golden bowl and the candlestick. All right? So that is why the candlestick that we are referring to is gold. And so I do this as part two, gold. So now that we have looked on the greatness and the comparison of these two sections of the church, move my camera right here. Now that we have looked on that, we're going to deal with the history between those two temples, because just as the two temples represent the two sections of God's true church, just so the history between the two churches is also symbolic. The history between the two temples is symbolic of the history between the two churches, or the two revelation of God's church. All right, why is this important? Why is this important? All right, so let's look at the time of the building of the church. And we're going to turn to another chart here that I want you to take a look at. Time of the building of the temple. I'll turn to this chart for a moment. Take a look at this chart. I'm going to talk a little about this. Bring it up. You notice the format. What is the format? I'm going to rest it there for a little. So let's talk about the building. As we partially explained that the two literal temples successively built in ancient Jerusalem were types of the two sections of the Christian church. So the wide literal and spiritual contrast of these two typical structures was explained comparatively with type and antitype. Though we could have greatly enlarged on this subject, we have eliminated excessive talk right here because we want to shorten this. So a close look on the type is the only positive way to clear the truth, not only of the foregoing question, but, and the question is, when will the